I am thrilled to introduce our Direction Not Perfection community today to Jonathan Fitzgordon. He's the creator of the Rejuvenation movement method, which was born out of his own personal and professional experience with changing the body's habitual movement patterns through self awareness and repetition. And I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me, Lindsay.
Yes, I'm thrilled to talk today. I think we have so much in common. And it would probably be helpful before we dive into the real topic at hand, just to give a brief history of how you got to where you are in your career at the moment.
My story is one of injury. I, it wasn't that I wasn't an active kid, but I didn't do any like organized sports, but I ran and played at the playground. But in my 30s, I showed up at a yoga class, and my mother had made me do yoga when I was like 6. And I definitely had an ability to do it, but it was with a bunch of girls, and I wanted to be with my friends at the park. And I did it for about a year, and then I stopped. But I was 32 when I walked into a class, and I said, oh wow, like I am home. I just got really into it 6 or 7 days a week, and I got pretty advanced pretty quickly. But then about 2.5 years into it, I blew out my knees and ended up having to have 3 knee surgeries. And then the big question that changed my life came from one of my teachers when I returned to yoga yet again. And she said, what are you doing to not have a 4th surgery? And I said, oh my God, I'm going to have a 4th surgery if I don't figure something out how to change. And that's when I started learning about anatomy and learning about posture and walking. And in my case, I really learned that I was hypermobile. My joints are way too loose, which is what made me really good at yoga. I could put my feet behind my head. I do lotus and all sorts of tricks like that. But no one really taught me how to do it correctly. And that's why I hurt my knees. So all of my work stems from that and learning how to do all these things correctly.
So interesting. Okay, so one of the things that you had written in your bio, and I was like, well, we have to ask this, is that don't we all know how to walk? Like, if we're talking posture, we're talking movement, we're talking just daily actions that we're taking. So yes, there's yoga, yes, there's exercise, but you're also talking just how we move during the day. So let's start at that really simplistic level of we could actually learn how to walk better is kind of what I'm hearing out of you.
Totally. It's kind of funny because one of my main questions is who taught you how to walk? And you started walking when you were pre-verbal. You're about 1 year old, 14 months, somewhere in there. And no one really teaches you. You get up, you hold on to furniture for a little bit, you walk around, and then maybe your parents see your first steps and they cheer. And after that, you're on your own and you actually learn by imitating them, but no one taught them how to walk. And the really interesting thing is, let's say one of your parents had a car accident a few months before you started walking and they're limping. And we learn through imitation. So right from the start, we take on patterns that we might not best serve us. And so then you go through life, and the body, we have all these unconscious behaviors that we're not supposed to think about. You don't really think about how you're supposed to breathe. You don't think about how you're supposed to stand. You might go to meditation class, or you might get into the Alexander technique where they're going to talk about these things. But for the most part, a huge number of people just go through life without thinking of any of these things. And walking in particular, there's a real specific way we're designed to walk, and not many people are doing it.
Which is interesting. If you're walking through a mall or out at a park or something, are you noticing this out of every individual that goes by? Like, oh, they could use me.
Oh, it drives my family crazy, and all I do is spy on people. And I have 2 kids, and my daughter just went to college, but when she was in high school, when I go to pick them up, I'll look at the kids leaving school and I'm like, oh, that girl is in trouble. Oh, that boy is going to need surgery. And they're like, shut up, stop. So I can't help myself. It's pretty much all I do when my son plays hockey, and I go to the practices and I just look at everybody and I tell them, I'm like, you're not standing very well. And it's kind of comedy, but it's painfully true.
So I know that a lot of our listeners are just going to have the auditory part of this and not the visual, but is there a way that you can paint this picture where somebody's going, okay, then how should I walk? Or like, what am I looking out for?
Well, yeah, for sure. So I start with standing and I start with posture. And what I say is that everybody leans backwards when they're standing and no one thinks they are. So what, in a way, what I'm teaching is perception, that we perceive ourselves incorrectly in space, so that if you do lean backwards, and I do this with a lot of people, and I keep saying I've taught some of like the leading yoga teachers in the world, and I keep waiting for someone to show up in my studio and have good posture and good walking, and nobody does. And so if you're leaning backwards, but you think you're straight, and then I straighten you up, you think you're leaning forward. And that happens all the time. So, like for your listeners, one of the things I say is go look in a mirror or have someone take a picture of you from the side, and you won't believe it because you're most likely leaning backwards, but almost everybody says they think they're leaning forward. So everyone thinks
Hmm.
they're round shouldered and leaning forward. And I'm not saying people aren't round shouldered, but they're round shouldered and leaning backwards. And then when you add in the instruction that I don't think anyone grew up without being told, stand up straight and take your shoulders back. And it's the worst instruction you could possibly give to somebody because it actually makes you lean backwards.
Hmm.
And so we walk the way we stand. So we tend to lean backwards when we walk. And just like the simplest, easiest tip I can give to people is to take shorter steps. Like we tend to walk and take really long steps, which pulls us backwards further. And if we can develop a habit of taking shorter steps, automatically our walking patterns become more efficient.
Okay, and give our listeners an idea of like what are the repercussions of when our posture is not proper, when we're doing these things that you're saying that we're out of alignment. Why should we care?
Well, one interesting thing I say to people is that it's funny, some people can get away with having bad posture and bad walking. Like some people can smoke cigarettes and drink scotch their whole life and don't pay for it. I am not one of them, clearly, and I don't understand how that works. But some people just are not going to get away with it. And the thing is that the way you stand and the way you walk is not necessarily why you might be in pain, might why you have recurring injuries, but to me, it gets in the way of healing. So that the reason why a lot of people find themselves in pain they can't get out of, or going to multiple rounds of physical therapy or even surgeries, it's because the way they stand and walk is actually preventing them from healing and moving forward. So while
Hmm.
your patterns might not have led to the injuries, it's very often keeping people from healing successfully.
That makes so much sense. Yes, and I was saying earlier that you and I have a lot in common, and one reason why I said that is we serve a very similar community. We're very much 40 plus and women oriented, and that clientele who just wants to thrive in their daily lives, that wants to go travel and get on the floor with grandkids. And when we can't heal from an injury, or if we keep getting hurt, then it's just this uphill battle that everything's harder. Food's harder, movement's harder, enjoyment, all of it. So your fight for your clientele is what?
Well, the main fight is to get everyone needs to do more. And when you're in pain, and especially recurring pain, like, let's say you feel better for a few days, but then the pain comes back. Like you go to I love chiropractors, but if you don't change the way you stand and walk, you're not really partnering with them to make what they do stick. So
Mm.
when we're in pain, it brings on depression, and the emotional toll is so intense. So the idea for me is how to help people do more. because, one of my phrases is as we get older, when you think it's time to slow down, it's actually time to speed up. And we just, there's nothing quite like exercise to help us age gracefully, to help us think positively, to help us feel better, to keep our blood pressure in check, so, but when you find yourself stuck in these chronic injuries, you really get down on life, and it makes you believe you're never going to move again, and you're never going to be able to do the exercise you want. Some people I'm working with have never exercised, and they need a kind of push in a certain direction. But a lot of people I meet were long time exercises, and then what they get really down because of the pain starts, and then a surgery happens, and they just stop. And so a lot of what I'm trying to help people do is get back to activity, and then actually increase the activity if at all possible. Because if you want to age well, you got to move.
And when you're going that direction, are you believing that because movement like lubricates joints and muscles, or I mean, obviously it helps our brain space, but do you have any insight for us into the more we move, why that makes us ultimately feel better?
Yeah, totally. One of the things I talk about is hydration. That it's a common thing. You should hydrate, which most people think is drinking a lot of water. And I drink plenty of water. I work out a lot, so I drink a lot of water. But hydration is movement. So the way you hydrate the body is by actually moving the body. When you move the body, that's how your tissues get hydrated, how your organs get hydrated, how we keep our muscles supple. So movement is absolutely key. And it's not like I move 24/7. I like the couch, and I spend my evenings. I'm a big sports fan. I watch sports, but movement, you can't move too much. That's how you earn the ability to sit on the couch, especially like, muscle tone is so important, and core strength is so important. And that's kind of a cliche, but if you lack muscle tone, if you don't have a strong core and a strong spinal muscles, when you actually spend that few hours of night on the couch, if that's your thing, you suffer for it, because your body, your muscles and body aren't strong enough to know how to sit. But when your muscles are really balanced and toned, again, when we go back to standing and walking, when you lean backwards to stand and walk, your muscles are imbalanced. So what I'm trying to help people is bring balance to the muscles by standing well, walking well, and then employing that in the way you exercise. Then you can do anything you want, including take the break when you want to, because your muscles will support you through all of that.
And this is so interesting. And I think it's like generational changes happening, or generational thinking of change happening, because most people think as they age, and it's kind of like how people used to think of retirement. It's this time to kind of let it all go and just be. And you're saying the polar opposite. It's the time to kick it into gear and use your spare time to move, to feel good.
Yeah, unquestionably. And it is an interesting thing. Like, I work with people who are retired, and I'll say, well, what did you do for exercise? And someone will say, I was a runner. And I say, why'd you stop? And they said, well, I retired, and it was kind of built around my work schedule. And I said, I talk to way too many people who have that exact story, and you just can't stop. And I think it's a weird thing in our culture, maybe, that people think, eventually I'm going to be able to stop. But the truth is, you really can't.
Right. And for anybody that just pushed a panic button for,
Right.
what Jonathan is saying is that we find ways to love it too, right? Like, and that it can come in all different forms, from pickleball to walks on the beach to yoga to, like, there's no right answer of movement. It's just we have to find something that we enjoy and
It's
hopefully not
absolutely about enjoyment. And for me, one of the things I say is, I don't tell anyone you have to do anything, but you do have to move. And walking is the foundation. And genuinely, if you walk, I don't want to put a number on it. 10,000 steps is like your classic the amount you walk, but that's about 5 miles a day. And that's a good amount of walking. But you can get your exercise in simply by walking. And it's true. Not everyone even likes that, so, but you do have to find what you like. But in truth, once you start, you will start to like it. That's what I have found more than anything. Once the body gets moving, I can't tell you the number of people who months later they go, "Oh, I missed 3 days of walking and I was really bummed out," right? Because once you do start, everything feeds on itself. So I would absolutely start with walking. I do a lot of things. I walk and I bike and I hike. I actually think hiking is probably the best exercise on the planet. Even though biking is my main form of exercise, bike is not, in many ways, not so good for you because it's very linear and stuck in its pattern. You don't twist, and you're sitting the whole time. But that doesn't mean I don't do it because I get a lot of value from it. But hiking, if you can get off the cement and onto dirt and go uphill and downhill, and the way your feet move around the rocks and the sticks and there's just nothing quite like hiking. And then you're out in nature. And I know for me, one change that I've made in the last 6 months, I really love listening to podcasts and listening to music. And I religiously put my earphones on to go walk my dog. It was just like second nature. And then I decided to stop. I was listening to a podcast where someone said, maybe you should stop. And I decided to take out my headphones. And I live in Cleveland and it's a suburb. So there's tons of animals and birds. And it has really been a wonderful change that I now walk around listening to the world instead of having my headphones in. And I have my headphones in plenty still, but that's been one small little change that has just been great. So it's not that you have to do all the things I do, or all the things I say. You've got to do a ton of stuff. But if you want to do a ton of stuff, changing the way you stand and walk will help you do that ton of stuff. But walking in and of itself can accomplish so much for people in terms of health and longevity.
Amen. I totally agree with you. I think this is an interesting question because, again, you created the rejuvenation movement method. And I picture you in office working with individuals hands on, but I don't think that's what you're doing. Are you virtual with your clients?
I am mostly virtual. So we moved here to Cleveland from New York about 5 or 6 years ago. And when I was moving, everyone was like, wait a second, what do you mean you're moving? And because my mother-in-law is here and my parents passed away, and I think it's really good for kids to be around grandparents. And that's when I went virtual. So I've been on Zoom for a long time. Zoom became crazy popular in the pandemic. But I've been on it for a long time. And I teach yoga publicly here. And while I really love teaching publicly and being with people one-on-one, Zoom actually allows me to work with people really intimately. And like when I work with clients on Zoom, I'm taking a lot of pictures. I take pictures so what I would do is I take a picture of what I call old you posture, which is you're standing. And then I stand you up, and I always say the same thing. Now I'm going to stand you up correctly, and you're not going to believe me. And I move them into their new you posture, and then I show them both pictures. And it's arresting when you see it because you just don't think that you do that. And it's the same thing with walking. So I have gotten very comfortable working virtually, and it's the bulk of what I do.
You're using this camera ability to, like, you could have a client walking and you can still just do that virtually.
That's exactly right.
Doing.
And also the
Yes.
recordings are really great because everyone gets to, like, everyone is different, but I send people the new you and old you photos and I say, look, a lot of people will print them out and hang them up because we learn so many different ways. We learn by seeing, by feeling, by hearing. So the visual is great. And I send you the recordings, and some people like edit them down to 2-minute little snippets, and that kind of ability to see yourself is some people really don't like that, but it can be really helpful.
I can see that. So what is a whole, not even session, but if you got somebody for the amount of time that you feel like you need them in order to see real change, what does that whole journey look like with you?
Well, so I teach in so many different ways. So I have a bunch of streaming programs that you can just buy videos and learn how to walk on video. That's the core walking program. And I have something called the psoas release party. The psoas is a deep core muscle, and it's my favorite muscle. And it's fascinating muscle because it's the muscle of standing, the muscle of walking, and it's the main muscle of pain and trauma. So it's a really fascinating muscle. So I'm going to cover all of that, whether people get the video programs, but in my private lessons, they all start the same way: old you and new you. And then eventually, within a short period of time, people go, I don't want to do old you anymore. And I say, that's fine, just for the moment, show it to me. And so we stand, we walk, and then we work on exercises. Because I really do believe in, so I don't think, in the same way I don't think people walk well, I honestly don't think many people exercise well. And in truth, exercising poorly is better than not exercising at all. But you can learn to apply these techniques of standing and walking to your exercises. So I teach a lot of different core exercises, and I'm still a yoga teacher at heart. So I teach yoga online as well.
So why do you think, and this was even one of your questions, but like why some doctors or physical therapists or yoga instructors, like why do you feel like some individuals haven't been helped yet?
There are a number of different reasons that my clients tend to fall into a couple of categories. One of them is sensitivity, that some people are just more sensitive than others. Like, I know if you tell me that you're sensitive to medications, some people don't take well to medications that serve other people really, really well. I know you're a sensitive person, and I don't just mean that emotionally, but it correlates, it goes hand in hand. And I'm not saying doctors are insensitive, but they're not necessarily taking sensitivity into account when they're trying to help people. So what might work for 80% of the population who are not highly sensitive, which is like kind of a diagnosis, those sensitive people are not going to be served by doctors in the same way, and they need a kind of special approach. Another another group of people that I work with, which is really fascinating, is hypermobility. And a lot of people that's my story, right? I blew out my knees because I was hypermobile. All of my joints are just way too loose for their own good. It's ligamentous laxity. But I went through 35 years of my life without having any clue that I was hypermobile. I would twist my ankle regularly, like walk down the street and turn my ankle where my like ankle bone would touch the street, and never got particularly hurt by it because I was just so loose. You kind of rebound. And then one of the weirdest things, so I'm hypermobile in a way where everything is loose. My muscles are loose, my joints are loose, my ligaments are loose. But a lot of people who are hypermobile are actually tight in their muscles. And that can be really, and it's confusing to doctors as well and physical therapists. So they're not necessarily seeing that this person with really tight hips and tight hamstrings might actually have very loose ligaments and loose joints, which is why they continue to get injured. And so hypermobility, I mean, I can't tell you the number of people I say, do you know you're hypermobile? And they're like, you're crazy. And I'm like, wait, when you get up in the morning, can you bend down and touch the floor? And they go, yeah. I said, can you put your hands on the floor flat? And they say, yeah. I said, well, that's like the definition of hypermobility. If you look at a picture of hypermobility, that's the definition, but not everyone would think of themselves that way. And then the third thing is that it's the standing and walking. It's the doing things correctly, that like what I said about chiropractors, I want everyone, I love doctors. I love my doctor. I love my surgeon. I have no regrets about the surgeries that I had. But when I had those surgeries, I was not a partner with that doctor. I went into his office. He said, you need a surgery. I said, okay, right? That happened 3 times, and I never really thought about it. And what I'm hoping to teach people, because I am like a complement to all of these, any discipline out there. I'm trying to teach people that you need to be part of the conversation and part of the equation. So in a lot of ways, I teach basic anatomy to everybody, because if we knew more about how our body worked, if you knew how your foot worked and how your foot's supposed to touch the floor and how many bones you have in there and how that you're going to be better able to heal, work with your practitioners, and again, age gracefully. Not all doctors like partnering with their clients, with their patients, but I do think it's important to find the ones that do.
I agree. And I think that, again, this always comes back to just time, that our medical society is not provided enough time. Because, like, a true partnering, and I think this is the beautiful part about being outside of the medical office, is that you probably get like at least a half an hour, if not an hour, with your clients, right?
Yeah.
In any given session. Yeah. And me too. And I feel like that's the piece that we have to keep figuring out. We can partner if we have time to talk, but we can't get to know
Absolutely.
somebody in their whole body, not just that one area of ailment, if we don't have the time, which is hard. So
No,
that's where I
absolutely.
like, yeah.
You could imagine I'm saying one of my questions is, when's your first injury? So when you go to the doctor, they're talking about like the injury that they are dealing with specifically, and I'm like, well, when did you first get injured? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, it doesn't. You don't have to tell me now, but over the course of time, you will probably remember things. Like if you were in a car accident when you were 5 years old that you don't remember, maybe your parents remember and tell you, and you didn't heal exactly well, or you broke your foot and you were in a cast. Some people are in cast for a year. What is that going to do to the muscles of the leg and the way the foot turns? And then you're fine. You actually heal, but those compensations stay with you. So a lot of what I'm doing is detective work, in that we're uncovering. So my intakes can be really long and exhaustive, because I want to know your whole story in order to help you now.
Yes, which I think it's so good for our listeners to know that this exists out there. And that's like my forever part of this podcasting journey, is to expose resources. We have beautiful resources out there, but a lot of us don't even know like where to start or to look or to ask, because it's not commonplace yet.
Totally.
Yeah. So, what else was I going to ask you? What am I not asking you that you wish you could, speak over this community, and hope that and pray that they understand, if they walk away with nothing else, this tidbit?
It's interesting because your questions have been really good. We've definitely covered a lot. Um, not to be too cliche, but it's like hope and change, right? Like it's never too late to change. It's never too late to change your posture and the way you walk and the way you think, and not to not give up hope. It is so easy to find yourself in pain that doesn't seem to want to go. I work with people who've been in pain for years and years and years and years, but you can still heal. You just have to find the right way in. So hope and change is definitely a cliche in our world, but it's very real. And what I'm teaching is change. And when I talk about it, to go back to the beginning and unconscious behaviors, we're not designed to change these things. We're really designed to just, you walk and you breathe. So you have to kind of override the system to make these changes, but it's very, very possible.
I'm picturing that you might have a lot of aha moments built in for your clients. Like, I can see them going, oh, wow, that worked. Or because this would have to have some faith in the beginning of this journey, because your changes probably are small, right? Like some tweaking.
No, they're very small, because sometimes it's big, because I'll say you just got to lean forward. You just got to like go for it and be willing to overdo it, because some of these things are really small. But you've mentioned a number of things that are very specific to me, which is that idea of the aha moment. And that first aha moment comes in those two pictures when I show people. When I show the way you used to stand and the way I'm going to teach you to stand, and you look at yourself and you can't believe that you thought you were standing up straight. Now, I'll do workshops. I'm going to New York next weekend for a live workshop. I still love doing live workshops. So I'll bring a number of people up to do the same demonstration, right? So one person will come up and I'll say, I ask the same questions. Are your shoulders over your hips, behind your hips, forward of your hips? And they say forward. And I say, well, they're actually behind. And they go, no way. And everyone in the audience goes, yes way. So then I stand them up straight. They can't believe it. I do it with another person. I do it with another. They all say the same thing. So then I wait for the fifth person who again says they're forward. And I said, wait, didn't you just see that all of these people said that they're forward, but they're not? So why would you be any different? So those are the aha moments I'm looking for in so many different ways. Because, like in terms of exercise, almost most people know what a bridge is, when you're on your back and you lift your butt up. And they tend to get taught in a certain way and they're executed in a certain way. And mostly people are using their butt. They're using their glutes and their butt muscles to come up, which is not the way I teach them. And the way most people, they come to the outside of their feet, so they're not grounded. So when I can show you, you don't want that. What you want is this. They ground it to the inner foot, feel your abs working, not overly using your butt. That's another aha moment. So I am looking for them in standing and in walking and in exercise and all different types of life.
And then let's fast forward a couple weeks and somebody's been implementing and really taking your techniques to heart. What are the next moments of like, this is feeling so much better? Or like, what are you hearing out of your clients?
Well, it's interesting, because my clients fall into a lot of different categories where some people, it's going to be longer than weeks, especially when it comes to trauma or car accidents or like multiple car accidents where the body has really taken a beating. It could take longer, but I really do say you'll get it within days. That if you're standing differently and walking differently, you will notice a change almost immediately. But I go pretty far because sleep is one of my obsessions. All of these things are obsessions of mine, but sleep is really one of them. We're not, when I talk about chronic pain and sleep, you can't heal without sleep, but chronic pain prevents you from sleeping. So if I can help someone get even a half hour better sleep. So, it's interesting. It used to be considered to sleeping on your back was the best. And I worked for years to try to train myself to sleep on my back. And it turns out it's actually not the best. And if you're hypermobile like me, it's pretty terrible because my feet just turn out, they just roll out, and it's really not good for my hips. So I want people to sleep on their side. Here's a very simple tip that can drive you crazy a little bit, but I want people to sleep on their sides, preferably the left side, not the right, but either one is fine, with a pillow between the legs and keeping your legs together. You can't let one knee slide over the other because that really affects our pelvis and it affects our psoas and it affects our back. So for the radical people who really can't do it on their own, I have them tie their legs together. Take a bathrobe sash, something soft, and you tie your legs together at the thighs with a super thin pillow. Like I travel with my leg pillow. Like I don't leave home without it because like if you go to hotels, they're always thick, fat pillows. There's no such thing as a thin pillow in a hotel. So I travel with my pillow for my legs, and that you just can't even imagine how many people wake up in pain. And if they just change their sleeping position to sleep on the side, and if you move around, it's totally fine. I sleep on both sides. I switch all during the night. But if you can make a change to we're sleeping about a third of our life if we're doing well. And if you can get your body to be in a good position throughout the night, you will start to feel better immediately. So that's one of the first things I implement, actually.
Let's take that one step. What's happening with the head? So you're on your side. You want your pillow up by your head to bring you up to where your whole body's in a straight line type of thinking. Like,
That's exactly right. Like, and so you can be nutty about that. Like my pillows, so I sleep on two pillows, and they are exactly the width of the space between my shoulder and my ear, so that I'm not tilting my head in one way and I'm not dropping my head. So for people who sleep on their back, because again, if you sleep on your back and you're not going to change, okay. But then I say you shouldn't have a pillow there because the
right,
pillow
no
shoves
pillow.
your head forward, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then the main thing, the main thing no one is ever allowed to do under any circumstances is sleep on their stomach. And
Mm.
I tell, get a t-shirt with a pocket and put a tennis ball into it so that you cannot sleep on your stomach. Because what do you do with your head? If you're on your stomach, you're flattening your lower back, which is terrible. And you have to have your head turned to one side the entire time you're sleeping, which is that can't add up well for your head and neck.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I like the tennis ball trick. That's a sure
Yeah,
way to.
believe it or not, they now you can go online and find shirts with a pocket right in the middle for your tennis ball because they think of everything. Here's another weird like old wives' tale trick because I work with a lot of people who, if you have chronic pain, these things happen, right? Calf cramps at night. A lot of people wake up with calf cramps at night. And I write a blog, and so people ask me to write about things. So someone once wrote, "Why do I get calf cramps at night?" And I'm researching exactly why. And most things you read, they go, eat bananas, take magnesium, drink more water, and none of which particularly works all that well. And then at one comment on one blog post, somebody said, take a bar of soap and put it under your sheet on top of your mattress, and your calf cramps will go away. And lo and behold, it works. And
What?
it totally. And what's crazy is now this is all over TikTok, which is really funny. Like in terms of sleeping, I'm really into mouth taping your
Yeah.
mouth shut
Yep.
at night. It's become super popular. All of my little tricks are actually, they're all popularized on TikTok, which is not because of me, just because of other people, right? It's really funny. So the calf cramp thing is the bar of soap, as best I know, it's a pH thing because no one has ever been able to tell me exactly why it works the way it does. But if you think about bananas and they're all about pH balance. That's what the magnesium helps with. So if you put the bar of soap, so why I brought that up is they now make bars of soap for sleeping. They're like, hotel bars. And so if you put the bar of soap and again under your sheet on top of your mattress and you sleep with a blanket on top of you, it creates a pH environment and your muscles won't cramp up. And the crazy thing is, like I've told it to so many people. So a woman will say, my husband wakes me up 5 times a night, but I'm not going to tell him because he'll think I'm a lunatic. I'm like, great, just put the bar of soap in, he won't notice. And it works. And then I say, when they come back, replace the bar of soap. So, and it doesn't work. I will say it's not a 100% thing, but I'd say it's pretty 90% of the people who I tell to do it, it
But it's
works.
something to try, right?
And it's a very cheap solution. Absolutely. And then like I just did a sleep workshop recently and I listed like I found 10 bars of soap with extremely high pH because everything is out there. Like Dr. Bronner's is a soap that's a very, very high pH. So that's, you can use anything, but why not give it a shot and get the highest pH you can get?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're kind
Yeah.
of blowing my mind right now. Now I want to go research it. So
Yeah, it's great.
interesting. Yeah.
What's really
All right.
funny
I
is
hate.
half the people you read about will say you're a lunatic. Like that's one of the great things. Like some people say, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. It worked for me," and other people will say that's just quackery. But anecdotal evidence really works for me. I'm a fan.
Oh, absolutely. And so last question with the soap is does it have to be like right under your legs where you're sleeping or just somewhere close by?
No, I actually just say put it at the foot of your bed just because it's out of the way.
Hmm. Princess and the Pea. If you
Exactly,
feel your
totally.
so. Oh, this is so good. And I hate to do this, but we are going to wrap up. And I guess for that listener who's going, okay, I've been struggling with chronic pain. I'm ready to change something. I would love to just get to know you a little bit more. Do you offer kind of that free one-to-one just assessment session, or what's that look like for you?
Totally. So my website is corewalking.com. And anyone who would like to get on the phone with me and chat, I can, if you have somewhere to give a link, I can give a link to that, or you can go to the website and find me that way.
Yes, I will put everything in the show notes for our listeners. So no
Great.
worries. You'll be able to click into that. And again, I feel like this is one of those instances where if one of you listeners out there is going, maybe should I try it? Just take the actionable step and book the call. And then whatever, but like take that next step, because I feel like this is one of those things that I keep asking my listeners, like, what is holding you back? Why are you not taking these opportunities? I think people get nervous about feeling sales pressure. I offer free one-on-one calls that I don't feel like enough people take advantage of. Like, you have resources out there, use us, and then you don't have to do anything further with it. It's just a resource and an option down the road.
No, that's exactly right. I am probably the most low pressure salesperson I know.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
already see that. I just feel like I
Yeah.
would love for
Uh,
somebody to use you and get their aha moment.
that's great.
All right, we need to finish out with say it one more time. It was
Open change.
hope and change. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was really a pleasure. Thanks again. All
And we're
right.
good.
And we'll get started. Hey, Lindsay, how's it going?
I'm good, Jonathan. How you doing?
I am well. All right. So tell me a little bit about your stuff. Do you have pain actively? Do you have pain issues?
I discomfort, I would call it more so than pain. I it was probably 3 years ago, flipped over a bicycle when we were living
Uh-huh.
out in Arkansas. And I came down on the top part of my neck. And it's really weird because I can really feel it depending on what I do in the day. But it's never like, I wouldn't call it pain. It's just I know it exists all the time.
That's really interesting. Are there things that make it better or worse? Like, do you wake up with discomfort in the neck or?
Yeah, so I use if I wake up and use like this little neck roll pillow in the morning, I'll do that for 10 minutes before I jump out of bed. I always feel like that helps.
Oh,
And
great.
times that I've been intentional about doing yoga,
Yeah,
that has helped. And I think it's the stretching. And the more I sit and the more I do computer stuff, the more I can feel it.
right. So that's your main thing is the neck discomfort
Yeah.
and a history of any other kind of injuries or pain or anything like that?
Not a big history. I tweaked a knee
Right.
skiing 2 years ago, but other than that, it doesn't bother me anymore. It came back really fast.
That's great. So it sounds like you're really active. You bike and you ski and other stuff.
Yes, yes. And just
Yeah.
have been involved in sports or marathons or, kind of carried it over into the older part of life as well.
Oh, that's great. What are you doing? What do you do for exercise these days?
I do at least 2 to 3 days of resistance training, around 1 to 2 days of either walking or running, and sometimes more, but that's kind of a consistent week.
That's great. And have you ever thought about the way you walked, good or bad or otherwise?
Only because of wonderful people like you who make me
Great.
think of it.
That's great. All right. So that's good to know. So tell me about what position do you sleep in?
Side to side mostly, some stomach, some back.
Great. And you're never allowed to sleep on your stomach again. Ever, ever, ever.
Noted.
Yeah, so I did this workshop over the weekend in New York, and I invariably will, there were like 15 people in the workshop, and I said, everyone just show me how you sleep. And they were usually, it's pretty breaks down similarly, but in this workshop, 7 of the people slept on their stomach. And that like, that is really bad. And it's particularly bad for your neck. Right.
Hmm.
So we'll talk about in the context of your neck stuff. Like when you're on your stomach, what do you do with your head? It's got to
Right.
turn one
Exactly.
direction or another.
Yeah.
And when you're on your stomach, does one leg kind of slide higher than the other or out to the side?
Probably. I always notice that I like bulk a pillow underneath and then like yeah, something's twisted
Yeah.
when I'm on my stomach.
Yeah. So sleeping on your stomach, it flattens the lower spine and it messes with the neck. It's like, I'm not a fan of sleeping on the back either, but it's
Hmm.
much better than sleeping on your stomach. And sleeping on your back, when it comes to the neck, in a way, you shouldn't have a pillow, right? Because
Right.
if you want to be flat, you don't want to be shoving your head forward, which everyone thinks about forward head posture, and which everyone has. And um, sleeping on your back with a couple of pillows really shoves your head into that position regularly. When you sleep on your side, do your legs stay together?
Yeah. Yes.
Great, great. So I really recommend, do you sleep with a pillow between your legs?
No.
If you don't need it, it's not a necessity, but it's a really great thing to find like the thinnest pillow in your house and sleep with that between your legs. And it's really important not to let your one knee hike higher than the other. So that's like
Hmm. Hmm.
kind of my sleep routine. I'm really obsessed with sleep, like really obsessed with sleep. And I just try to get everyone sleeping better. And especially as we get older, like I think there's an illusion people have that you don't need to sleep as much as you get older, and that is just so not true. Like
Hmm.
we need to sleep. All right, so let's take a look at your posture. We'll get right to it. Come on and stand up.
Okay. I purposefully tried to get in a good area that you
Yeah, I
could.
can see this is going to be perfect. So you're going to
Okay.
back up a bunch and probably tilt the camera down a little bit. And yeah, that's going to be great. And just let me know that you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Killer. Put your hair back. Perfect. Awesome. Turn sideways and step back even a tiny bit more. One more time. And I just want to see yeah, that's great. And you can tilt the camera down just a fraction, kind of tilt it down more. It can take
Do
a
you want me to
minute
take off
to get
this
there.
jacket? Would it be helpful to, or does not matter?
If it's comfortable for you to take it off, that's great. If not, don't worry about it. So now you can slide towards me a step and we'll get a better view. Perfect. Oh, that's awesome. All right. So how do you think your posture is?
Normal. What? I don't know what that means, but it feels normal.
That's great. So do you think you have good posture? Normal is a
I think I
great word.
have
That's a
decent.
really excellent. Great, great, great. That works for me. So yeah, look straight ahead, look at the fireplace. And I'm just going to ask you questions. First off, spin 180 towards the couch so I can see both sides because it's interesting to see both sides. Oh, great. Yeah, you're pretty even side to side. That's a really, really positive. Come back to the other way. Yep, perfect. All right. So I'm going to ask you some questions, right? Are your
Yeah.
shoulders on top of your hips, behind your hips, or forward of your hips? Do you have any sense of that?
It feels like they're on top of my hips.
They are, which is really good. They are slightly behind, but less so than most. So that's a positive. Are your legs directly under your hips, forward of your hips, behind your hips?
Maybe behind my hips?
They're forward. So one out of two is not bad. Let's keep going. If do you know what hyperextension is, and are you hyperextending your knees?
I feel like I am doing that at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. So if you're doing it at the moment, you do it a lot. That's like the bottom line.
Okay.
And that was my story, right? And I say I'm really into the 80-20 Pareto principle. Are you familiar with the 80-20 rule?
Yes.
So like I used to hyperextend 80% of the time and not 20, and now I don't hyperextend 80% of the time and still hyperextend 20. And that change for me is that's the change that got me out of pain, honestly. Like my story is hypermobility and just way too loose in my joints, and I lived in hyperextension. And the bummer of that, when you go to yoga and you can do that, they're like, this is great, do more of it, you know? All right, so look straight ahead. I love the position you're in right there with your standing on the outside of the foot and hyperextending the knee more. The last question, and then we'll change, right, is if you feel some of these questions, you know, I don't know is a great answer. I was having beers with some friends last night who are, look straight ahead, keep looking ahead, who are high school teachers. And they were like, it's unbelievable how people just can't say, I don't know. And as I said that in the workshop, I'm like, I don't know is a great, great answer. All right. So if I ask you about your lower back, the relationship between your lower back and your lower belly, like is one longer than the other? Does that make sense as a question?
Yes. Lower back feels maybe longer than the front side belly.
Great. Now you got two wrong out of three. So your lower back is shorter than the lower belly. And
Okay.
see if that makes so that might what I'm asking might not make sense. So I'm going to say it's like your lower back is a little compressed compared to the length at the front of the belly. Does that make sense at all?
Yes.
Awesome. Good. So now I'm going to stand you up straight and you're not going to believe me, okay? So take your thighs backwards. You want to take your thighs, yeah. That was really interesting. You did it and then you went back to where you were. So yeah,
Okay.
nice, nice. Yeah. Take your time. Okay. All right. So that's great, but you're doing that all from the calves. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I
That
feel like I'm like
really
pushing my knees back to push my thighs
that
back.
that's exactly right. Well, so you're correct. And I'm seeing it as the calves moving back. So that's awesome. But you feel it, everything, all of this stuff is feeling and perception, and the more you feel, the better, right?
Yeah.
So now soften your knees, which doesn't necessarily mean bending them. Well done. And now try to take your thighs back without pushing the calves back. What would that? Oh, awesome. Take the thighs back a little bit more. Nice. Now your legs are directly under your hips.
That feels
See
like
if
I'm
that makes
really pushing my butt out.
you're actually not, but feeling that way is totally fine. Again, it's all perception. I'll show you. I'm taking pictures as we do this, and I'll show you. And now what I want you to do is actually, you know, it's a weird instruction. I say drop the front ribs, which most people don't have any idea what I mean. That really nicely done. Do it a little more. Yeah, that is killer. How does that feel?
I feel super awkward.
You're straight up and down. Like you
Okay.
are perfectly, perfectly straight. What feels super awkward?
In my head, I feel like I am sticking my butt out and pushing my chest out.
That's so cool because when I asked you to drop the ribs, you did that so well. And that is sort of dropping the chest as opposed to sticking the chest out. Does that resonate when I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Um, it's so interesting because most go back to old you. This is literally what I call you were, yeah, nicely done. You even, so do you feel the difference when you go back to what I call old you?
Yes.
So you hyperextend your knees, you jam your thighs forward, you lean backwards a little bit and compress your lower spine. Does
Yep.
that make sense? Okay. So as you're standing here, do you feel any discomfort in your neck?
I was sitting at my desk all morning, so like I kind of always feel it at the moment.
Okay, great. So from here, go back to the new you. Soften the knees, take the thighs back. And look, it's not science, like it's not exact. It's just all about like tiny little movements, right? And tell me if that changed the feeling in your neck at all.
It does relieve pressure.
Perfect. Now, I'm not even opposed to going too far. So is there still pressure? And is there a way, if you continue that, can you relieve all the pressure? And maybe not, it is what it is.
Especially standing, this feels good as far as nothing's tweaking.
Great, great. Drop the front ribs a little bit.
Drop the front ribs.
Yeah, well done. And I think that should even have taken a little more pressure out of the neck. Does that resonate at all? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really feel like I'm like, I know I don't look like that probably on the camera, but I feel like I'm bending over almost.
That's fine. You're not, as I'll show you in the picture, you won't believe it because you're really straight. So again, what I'm teaching is just perception. So go back to old you, and your brain thinks this is straight. Or your brain thinks this is what you call decent posture. So if I take you from what your brain thinks is decent posture to a new position, it should not feel right, right? It would not make any sense for both positions to feel right. Soften the knees, take the thighs back, drop the ribs more. Yeah, so even like you want to lengthen the lumbar. You look great here, but you want to lengthen the lumbar spine a little bit more by broadening the middle back a little bit, if that makes any sense. And don't worry, now I don't even care. You look great. So you're straight. Does it feel different the second time I put you there?
No, I actually feel like there's some like level of I can get back into where you're putting me, but it definitely feels super awkward.
Great, great. I just have this all the time where I had a new client last week and she was like, I am slouching and I don't want to slouch. And I'm like, look, I'm going to try to help you realize that you feel like you're slouching. And, there is a measure of maybe you'll think you're slouching when I show you the picture. But if you can get into it and it gets rid of your pain, there's so much positive, right? So let me give you a couple of different, I'm going to give you just one way to feel this, right? Go back to old you. Nicely done. And that's the instruction we get our whole life, right? Lift your chest, take your shoulders back.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible, terrible instruction. And why I'll show, and nothing means anything to me to just say these things. Like I need you to feel it, and I only succeed if it makes sense to you and you feel it. So try to feel your breath here, just the inhale and the exhale, and tell me, like, how do you breathe? Where does it go? Is it deep? Is it shallow? Is it full?
If I'm concentrating, it's deep, and I feel like I naturally do more like stomach out breathing.
Great, love that. So I would say, and this is really about anatomy, like when you're leaning backwards, the way you're leaning backwards, it's almost impossible to breathe as well as you could breathe. And I think that your chest, they're called the intercostal muscles of the rib cage, they're doing more of the work than they need to. And again, you don't look bad. It's not like your chest is really rising with every inhale, but it's moving up a bit if you can feel that.
Yeah.
And now go to the new you without my help. See how it goes. So great. So that's really cool. That time you actually bent your knees, which you don't have to do. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. You have a pretty good feel of the subtlety of it. So tell me if the breath feels different.
You naturally go more stomach.
Perfect. That's exactly right. And you didn't do anything to make that happen. You just changed the way your bones are aligned. And all of a sudden there's more access to the breath. Does that resonate?
Yes.
Yeah, more a full, I don't need, like, I do talk about diaphragmatic breathing and belly breathing, but really I just talk about full breath. Like you're using more of your trunk now to breathe, and it's easier to breathe. And then go back to old you and feel that. And the breath changes
It's
completely.
just kind of more all over the place versus stomach.
Perfect. That's great. Does that kind of make sense? All right, come on back and I'm gonna share my screen and
show you what you look like. And it's funny because like one of my job is to really not shock you, right? But you want to be like, whoa, I cannot believe that that's exactly what it looks like. All right, so first, no, wrong picture. Here is old you, right? Hyperextended
Okay.
knees, not terribly hyperextended, right? But hyperextended knees. That's my whole story is hyperextension, too loose. And your thighs are kind of leaning forward. Do you see that when I show you that?
Yep.
Great. And then your shoulders, they're relatively on top. Let me get my little drawing tool out because that can help, especially when, I mean, and again, you know, you're not, it's not like you're so far off, but yeah, you know, look, like your shoulders, that's a pretty straight line, maybe a little angled back. Let me just be a little more precise. And you know what's interesting about this stuff for me is it doesn't have to be incredibly precise. It's much, you know, because we're just dynamic beings. It's never like we are always, yeah, I'd say that's more vertical. So we're going to say you were right because I'm looking at ankles as the anchor point.
Yeah.
Your shoulders are relatively over your ankles, but they're, if this is your hip, they're kind of behind the hip. You see that? Does that make
Yes.
sense? Yeah. But your legs are way forward of the ankle line. And you know what? It's what we call the plumb line, that you want to have a line that goes from your ears to your shoulders, to your hips, to your knees, and to your ankles. And all that means is your bones are holding you up successfully. And in this position, in this old you position, your muscles are just, all muscles are overworking. And when it comes to the neck, when it comes to everything, it's all about the pelvis. And when your pelvis is not aligned over the ankles and the knees and the legs aren't underneath the pelvis, it's really hard for the neck to find ease. All right. And then the thing that I see the most for you is not even the hyperextension. It's not even the thighs forward, but it's what I'm seeing as compression in the lumbar. You know, do you see that? How like, and basically what I do is read wrinkles, that I'm looking at wrinkles in clothing so that when I'm putting you to new you, I'm actually looking to see if you can change the wrinkles in your clothing that signals to me that you're in a different place, if that makes any sense. And so do you see what I'm saying? Like the lower back is a little shorter and the lower belly is a little longer. Yeah. And it's so funny because I'm not saying this is aesthetically not pleasing, right? But you feel like people feel I'm really upright and the shoulders are back, and this is what my mother told me to do my whole life. All right, so let me
I think what's interesting about looking at that from the side for me is I like feel the pressure in my neck from looking at my body that way.
Great. Oh, I love hearing that. Love hearing that. Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't think you're too far away from getting rid of all your neck stress. This is new you.
Okay, so I feel like my head looks further forward though.
That's a great, great observation because it is. And you know, I've been doing this a long time, and for a long time, like almost 20 years, I used to really be concerned about that, and I would try to get people's head back, but I realized I was always trying too soon. And then invariably the attempt to take the head back into a better place, quote unquote, puts you back to old you. So like in this instance, when I'm first putting people into new you, I don't really care about the head. But this is a really interesting thing. If you can see how I showed you your shoulders are relatively over your ankles, so are your ears in the old you. And my take on that is that the brain wants to be level and feel level. And essentially you're sacrificing everything underneath the neck. I don't know why that happened. You're sacrificing everything below the neck to satisfy the head. And I'm saying it's much better to line up everything below the head for the whole body, including the head. And in like in the workshop I did on Saturday, I was teaching teacher trainees of yoga. They were like, yoga training program. And what I love is they can be a little feisty. And they're like, oh my God, my head is so forward, that's terrible. And I'm like, what? We just, again, it's like a societal thing that the head should be upright. And it should. It's really better for us if it should, but it's really hard to align the head correctly. Everyone has forward head posture. And I have really come to the belief that it's not nearly as bad as everything else being off, if that makes sense. And then if I can show you how to get to new you, and it takes a couple of months, this is not going to change in a day, right? It really takes repetition and repetition and a little obsession. Like you really got to think about it and remember it. But if I can show you how to go from old you to new you, after a couple of months, you can start working on getting the head to a better place, right? So are you seeing what I'm showing you? You're still locking your knees a fraction here in the new you, but really not as much as here. And what I see can be really subtle, but for me, your feet are much more evenly on the floor than in this picture. Like here, you're more on the outside of your foot. But look at the lower back. Like, look at the length in your lower back compared to there. Look at your lower belly. Like here, your front and back are super even. Right? So it's not that it doesn't matter to me what you wear, because your clothes really tell you what you're doing. It's a kind of a really neat thing. Do you see how your shoulders are back here?
Yeah.
Here's a really cool observation, right? Look at the seam of your jacket and how it's perfectly straight up and down here, perfectly perpendicular. That's its design. Yeah, that's its design. And here it's just leaning backwards, which is really not its design. Does all that stuff kind of resonate?
Yes. You can totally see it. Are you going to draw the line on this picture again too? Because I think that's fascinating.
Oh, I stopped the share instead of drew the line. Yeah, no, and one of the things for me is we learn in so many different ways, and you see and you feel and you touch and you hear, and I am encouraging people to learn in any way they possibly can. So it's funny, I would say in this picture, your ankles, knees, hips, and shoulders are perfect. Your shoulders are actually rounded a fraction forward, while everything else is perfectly lined up. But I love that. I just love that. And your head is a little forward, but who cares? So you mentioned skiing, right? Who would be a better skier? Which of these two pictures would be a better skier?
That's a great question. I know, because the second, you're
ready to ski.
Yes.
And the first person is so not ready to ski. The picture, you on the left, you are so not ready to ski. And the way I'm teaching this stuff is you should be ready to ski at all times. And if you told me you play golf, it's the same thing. And if you play tennis, it's the same thing. That new you is how we accomplish every sport, right? Not every. It's funny because swimming, which I think is great, we tend to swim in old you in a way. It's hard to play golf in old you, or ski. You can't ski in old you, right? You stick your butt out, you bend your knees, you get deep into position, and it's really purely old you. Does that kind of resonate?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions about that? Like, are you seeing things you don't like other than the head being slightly forward?
No, it's definitely, I would say if you could take just shoulders down, I think that's like unbelievable. But to your yoga friend's point, like when your neck already feels like, I have that I forget what that's called right now, but the little bump on the back of my neck.
Uh-huh.
And that, like, all I see when I see my head forward like that is aggravating that.
But when you stood this way, your neck felt better.
Right.
So isn't that weird, right? Like if I was to show you, if we hadn't had the conversation and I showed you these two pictures and I said, which position do you think is better for your neck? You would most likely say the picture on the left.
Right, I would.
Yeah. And you felt really, again, meaningless what I say. It's only what you feel. But you felt pretty clearly, right, that in the new you, your neck had less stress and strain.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, now it really all comes back to the pelvis. If I'm helping someone with their feet, if I'm helping someone with their knees, it just doesn't matter. It's always about the pelvis. So as you're sitting here and we're chatting, are you feeling neck strain?
Yeah, I do feel like whenever I'm sitting, not terrible, but I just feel it. I was actually going to ask you, like, to put me in a seated position like you put me in a standing.
That's right. So just stick your butt out. And how does your neck
Which
feel?
like arches my back a little though, right?
Totally. That's exactly right. Now, it's great that you said arches my back as opposed to arches my back too much, right? So we're supposed to have our back arched when we're sitting, and sitting is really bad for us, right? Like sitting well is worse for us than standing poorly. Right? But sitting is really bad. So now you're sitting up a little better with that curve in your lower back, right? Which is old you spine. Feel your neck and then go back to where you were. Totally. Oh, that's great. Let me show you this. I'll show you. That's really fun because I don't usually do this. So does your neck feel tension when you're sitting here like this?
I mean, if I'm not, no. But that's because if my arms were out and I was typing, then I really start to feel it's like the lever pressure.
I totally get that. Totally. But now sit up again, stick your butt out and put that curve in your lower back.
Okay.
And how does that feel? And just in general,
it feels good.
Even, yeah.
Awkward, but good.
Awesome. Let me show you. Let me get rid of these. And maybe, for me, what's fun is you don't always see what I want to see. So no, I'm not even seeing exactly. I think this is the better position, but I'm not seeing that much of a difference. So we'll leave that. That's why I probably don't take that many sitting pictures. But it is all the same thing. But there are a lot of rules to sitting, which is feet flat on the ground, even as I have one of my ankles crossed over my knee as I speak, right? But we want to be like right now, my eyes are 2/3 of the way up my monitor. That's really, really important that we're not tilting the head down to look at the monitor. And when we type, we want our hands not to be resting on things, which is actually really good for the neck. So there's a lot of the rules of sitting are pretty extensive in the same way like the rules of posture. All right, so let's take a look at your walk. Come on up again. And
I might need to tilt down again here.
So you're just going to walk around the way you normally walk. And it's hard when you're inside, but you want to think you probably on the street, you probably walk a little faster. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And how would you describe your walk?
Words to describe it. I feel like I don't feel a certain way about it.
Perfect. That's a great answer. So keep walking. So the thing I want you to feel is your feet. Would you say, take your shoes off if you don't mind. And you don't have to just walk straight back and forth. You can even walk around the room as long as you can hear me. How would you say your feet hit when you walk? Like, do you hit the heel hard, soft, easy?
I definitely hit heel first, but not that hard, but harder than the front of my foot.
Great. And then from the heel, where do you go? To the inner foot or the outer foot?
Kind of dead center. Maybe a little more on the outside.
Great. And the easiest way to know that is you don't have to do it now. You pick up a pair of shoes and it can tell you everything about how your posture and how you walk. So you're
I definitely feel like I go out more than in. I don't feel like I'm.
perfect. That's exactly right. So keep doing that a little bit and then tell me if do you feel like you're leaning backwards? Now that you know like that I think you're leaning backwards when you stand.
I think you tell me I'm moving back.
Yeah, do you feel that?
Yes.
Great. Good. Um so keep going, enjoy it. Hopefully for the last time ever. Say again.
Getting my steps in.
Yeah, perfect. So all right, let's leave it at that for the moment. But so now wherever you want to stand, go to new you. And then you're going to exaggerate. You did that really nicely, by the way. You just very simply dropped into that better place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like I almost have to over exaggerate. I start with my knees too bent, and then I can feel like where to come up to.
Perfect. That's a great choice because it's all about fun and it's all about being dynamic and you could fix anything you want, you know, so overdoing it is good. Lean forward a little more, drop the ribs a little more. Nice. Walk like that. What does that mean to walk like that?
Takes
And tell
effort.
me, what's that?
It takes effort.
Oh, that's
Like I
interesting.
have to
Tell me about your
really think
feet.
about it.
Oh, that's super fun. Tell me about your feet.
I will push more of my weight to the top. It's
Yeah,
more like leveled out from the front to the back.
great. And you're using more of your whole foot instead of the outer foot. Does that resonate?
Yeah, yeah.
And you're not leaning backwards simply because you are leaning forward. And then
Right.
go back to old you. Well done. And you know now it's heel to outer foot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
leaning backwards. Now again, I'm not saying you are suffering in your neck as you're walking, but walk an old you and feel your neck. It doesn't have to be a lot of tension for you to feel the difference.
It's just everything has shifted more back on that spine.
Exactly. Everything is compressed in the back of the spine.
Yeah.
And just slightly. Some people are doing this way more than others. You know what I mean? It's all relative. And now go to new you and feel the back of the spine and feel the neck. And be
It like
willing.
automatically relieves it the second I lean forward, which
Perfect.
is interesting.
Perfect. That is it. So here is the thing. Pain is the best incentive. That the tension you feel that you know so well, right? If you learn that walking in a different way gets rid of that tension, that gives you an unbelievable incentive to get rid of that tension. You know what I mean? And it's this stuff is not hard. The problem is, however old you are, you've been doing what you do in old you for a long time. And we are never too old to change habits, but you got to start somewhere, right? And that change is
Right.
really interesting. So is that kind of making sense?
Oh, absolutely. It's like you can feel it instantly.
That's great. Let me share. I'm just going to show you one of my favorite pictures. This is how everybody walks. Give me one second. How is your core? Do you think you're strong? Do you think you're weak?
I feel like I have a decent core.
Awesome. Do you know that image? Do you know that picture?
I haven't seen that, but that's funny.
It's R. Crumb. He's a hippie from the 60s. So
Mhm.
his genius is exaggeration. This is
Mhm.
how everybody walks. Leaning forward, leaning backwards, hitting the heel, and going to the outer foot. And usually with the feet slightly turned out.
Uh-huh.
And it's just how everybody walks. So the benefits of changing, first off, for you particularly, the only thing you really have any trouble with, and that's so great that like all you have trouble with is some tension in your neck, plus you know why. That's so key. You know, for some people, it can take me a while to figure out why they're even in the pain that they're in. But you know, you had a bike accident and messed up your upper spine and it healed, but it lingers, right? So this is one of the things I say to people is like, it's not that the way you stand and walk, it is why you're in pain. It's that the way you stand and walk is preventing you from getting out of pain when pain won't go away. Right. So you're still
Mm-hmm.
carrying this tension in your neck from an injury that healed a long time ago. Right. But you'll carry that for life if you don't change your posture and your walking patterns. And when, you know, my story is 3 knee surgeries in my 30s, it's the best thing that ever happened to me because I would still be suffering if I didn't have those surgeries and learn, man, what am I going to do to not feel this way? Right.
Great.
All right. So you want to check your core a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is what all the first sessions I do. My cat won't stop bothering me. This is super kitty.
Oh, hi, buddy.
Um, they just know when to be annoying. Uh, so all of my initial sessions are standing, walking, sometimes core, um, sometimes not. You know, everyone is so different, and sometimes I just have to stretch things out a little bit. Sometimes I don't even ask people to change their walk yet if their posture is really bad. But you're really right in that kind of subtle change is really what you need, right? So we're gonna, if you want, lay down. You're gonna come to lay down on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat to the floor. If you want to grab
All
a
right.
yoga mat, you can. If not, don't worry about it.
Oh, I don't care. I've got carpet. I'm just gonna try to angle me down enough so you can see me. Which way do you want me laying?
Sideways, always sideways is great for me. Yeah,
Am I
perfect.
in your picture? Okay.
Yeah, totally. Um, so this is just the way you naturally lay down.
Yep.
Yeah, so you have a lot of extension in your feet, right? Which is just an interesting thing. Flex your feet a fraction.
Oh,
Yeah, so you know, like these are the things I'm always looking for is what are the patterns that we have, what have we developed naturally over time? And it's not a good, bad, or otherwise. It's just what it is. All right, so bend your knees, place your feet flat to the floor. When you say you have a good core, is it from exercises or just the way you do sports and work out?
I think just working out. I feel like I'm a trainer and I've done full body
Great.
resistance training for a long time.
That is great. So I'll give you a little trick about your head and neck, right? If you look straight up, are your eye sockets looking straight up or are your eyes looking straight up? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. Okay. Eyes looking straight up, maybe eye sockets a little angled.
Oh, interesting. But I think they're angled back a little bit. So like lengthen your neck on the floor a tiny bit. Other way.
Like you would go forward.
Yeah, yeah. So now that to me, your eye sockets are pointing straight up. So that
That's
you don't
funny.
have to move your eyeballs forward or back to look straight up at the ceiling. Does that make any sense?
Does, but it only because you're telling me that it feels the reverse.
Great, great. No, you know, that's what's really fun is one, you don't have to believe me. You know, like that's the best part of this stuff is like I'm just presenting something to you and you get to say, oh, what is this really wacky guy talking about? Is he right? Is he wrong? It doesn't, I'm like, I say this when I teach, like, it is my job to be stupidly confident. It would make no sense if I wasn't, but that doesn't mean I'm right. You know what I mean? Like, I could be completely wrong. It's just the nature of it. I have to convince you. And I love it when people disagree because I think that helps them process better. You know, if people just agree with me all the time, then why it's harder to change if you just go, yeah, okay, you know, I buy that. So all that is really good. As you're sitting here in your spine, would you say your rib cage is on the floor or off the floor?
It's off. I would make a conscious effort to put it on the floor.
Perfect. And now, but you made a conscious effort by tucking your pelvis under. Does that resonate?
Yes.
So now make a conscious effort without tucking your pelvis under. How would you put your rib cage to the floor?
Pushing my hips into the ground.
That's where that works. I would just push the ribs into the ground if you can.
All of it. I feel like I still have a gap with just pushing the ribs in.
Well, so you want a gap for your lower back, but not your middle back.
Gotcha.
Got it? And that's new you. So go back to where you were. Like the ribs come off the floor a little bit. That's old you. That's the shorter lower back, longer lower belly. Because our patterns show everywhere. So now drop the ribs again. Nicely done. I'd say you tiny bit, you tuck the pelvis a little bit, but who cares? Take your right foot just 3 inches up off the floor, just 3 inches. And now I want you to feel your spine to see what your spine does when you bring the second foot 3 inches up off the floor. What happens?
It wants to come up.
Well, that's cool. It wants to. Did it or did it not?
No, it kind of stayed the same.
Perfect. That's great. I mean, that's really great. So that's my first test for someone's core, right? So now start with the left foot and then do the right foot and see if it moves at all.
Not a lot.
No, I actually think it was even more stable this side. And then sometimes you turn the muscles on and they just start working for you. So that's really great, which isn't to say you couldn't have more tone, but you can imagine a lot of people, that second foot comes up and the lower back just arches way up off the floor because there's no abdominal tone to stabilize it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you do bridges much? Do you ever work on that kind of thing?
I mean, I've been trying to do back bends. Like, is that what you mean by a bridge?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You've been trying?
Ask me to do that.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to ask you to do a minor version of it. So a bridge is where you keep your feet down and you lift your hips up. That's just a bridge. So yeah, so
Yes.
do that.
Do you
Just
want
lift
that?
your hip. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Awesome. What did you use to do that?
I feel like I'm in my hamstrings right now and heels.
Great. And you used your butt muscles. Does that resonate?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
They
Come
feel like
on
a
down.
byproduct. But yes.
That's perfect. And now you're on the outer foot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Heel and great. Come on down. Lower down. Make your feet parallel. So this is where what I teach gets a little different. Because I think most people are teaching bridge the way you just did it and not caring if we use our butt to come up. A lot of people think bridge is about glutes, and I don't think it is. I think it's about abs. And they let the feet do whatever they want. So what I want you to do now is be really aware of your big toes. Walk your feet back towards you a tiny bit, yeah. Be really aware of your big toes. Stick your butt out. Like arch your back a little more. Well, that's fine too. Yeah, no, that's fine. Come on up. And now stick your butt down a fraction. Yeah. So you're barely off the floor, right? but you're not gripping
Yeah.
your butt anymore, and you're grounded into your whole foot. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's a back bend. That's bridge. So you're trying to do yoga. When you say you're trying to do back bends, you're trying to learn how to do wheel pose.
I just was trying to get back to like even a little bit of my flexibility of younger years. So just to be
Yeah,
able to
totally.
like bridge up and have
That's
it feel
awesome.
comfortable was my
You do
goal.
not have to do that now, but if you want to try, you can do it. And I will promise you, you're letting your feet come to the outside of your foot, and you're gripping your butt and trying to force yourself up through your glutes. And that's the
And your
opposite.
recommendation would be,
Well, so when I teach this in yoga, I make people, I will not let people's feet move. Like a lot of people turn their feet out. I won't let that happen, but I almost always teach it with a block between the thighs. You know, and I have little tricks that I say, look, if you can't do this thing, you should not do wheel. And that thing would be to be able to lift your, to press on your hands and just come onto the top of your head. Like there are all these little tricks, I think, because wheel is hard, right? Because you're trying to get that thrust up, and you want to do it quietly with no thrust. And it's really not easy. So go back to do your regular, what I call old U bridge, and just lift up the way you normally lift up. And you're coming to the outside of the foot, and it's all butt. And it also crunches the SI joint, if that makes any sense. You know, the sacroiliac joint kind of closes at the back. Does that make sense?
yeah.
And now stay up, but stick your butt down a little bit. Just relax. Yeah, yeah. And you drop into the whole foot. You stop working. The butt is still working. The glutes are still working, but in a different way. And your abs are working a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's great. That's just great. So the next time you try to do wheel pose, that's what I call when you bring your hands up over your head and push up. That to me is
Yeah.
wheel pose. Yeah, that's wheel, and as opposed to bridge. When you do wheel, if you're really trying to come on back up to sit, we're just about done. If you do wheel, so you are pretty good in your core. You're pretty strong. That doesn't mean you can't get stronger, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone can get stronger.
Absolutely.
But when you work on that wheel pose, I would put a block between your thighs, which will freak you out because you're going to be like, where in the world am I getting this from? If I can't just open, right? If I
Yeah.
can't just splay open, where am I going to get the energy, right? So you have to
Yeah.
commit to that block, and you have to commit to the big toes,
Okay.
right? You have to commit to the big toes. So we're done. And now if we had more time and we would be able to talk about walking, all I talked about was your feet, but walking is really dynamic. Like and I usually just don't talk about this the first session, right? But every step is a spinal twist. And when we're done, if you want to walk around a little more and feel it, your shoulders are not rotating when you walk, right? And every step you take, your shoulders are supposed to rotate, your hips are supposed to rotate. Walking is this incredibly dynamic thing, but old you, like that keep on trucking guy, just there's no dynamism. You can't get any of that flow that we're looking for unless you're willing to go forward. Like what you say, you feel like you're forward, like skiing. That's walking. Walking, it's forward motion. It's falling forward. Does that all kind of resonate?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
It's
So
so
I
good.
throw a lot of stuff out, right? And the truth is, it's impossible to remember it all. And I'll send you your recording, and I can send you the recording. But you want to take away one thing, right? Even though I said about 80, you want to really come away with one thing that you can focus on, because it's just the brain doesn't really process too many things at once. So if that makes sense, you know what I mean? Awesome.
Yes. So I just want to finish up and remind our listeners that this is me taking advantage of what Johnathon's free exploration call looks like. And this is what you would walk somebody else through, correct?
Well, no, in truth, I do a little less. As in, this is really what my first lesson is.
Okay.
So the first, it's probably about half of that, it would be a lot less spacious in terms of like we'd get quicker to standing, quicker to walking, and I usually don't do the core in those sessions as well. They're just more
Spoiled
way,
today is where I should start.
that's exactly right. Which is
Yes.
totally fine, but that's great.
Okay. So like a touch point of things that we did today. And then if they're like, gosh, feeling it how I'm feeling it right now, and I would really appreciate, actually, I love that you gave more in the sense of that's how it would progress. Like you
That's
could
exactly
stay
right.
virtual. You don't have to be in person and still keep taking that next notch of like improvement.
That is correct. Yeah, no, and like my private program, it's 3 months to start because it really does take a good amount of time to make it habitual. And it's funny, the older you are, the harder it is to change habits. If I get someone who's like 20, it does not take long for a 20-year-old to change habits in the way that a 60-year-old, to say we're set in our ways is not an exaggeration. So it just takes a little longer, but you're never too old to change, right? So,
Yeah.
so the private program, it starts at 3 months just because of that.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, even as we're sitting here wrapping up, I'm crossing a leg and I'm like both feet on
So
the
am I.
ground.
So am I. That's the thing. But when you get really strong and you do this stuff well, you can get away with those things more. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a really key thing.
And
Awesome.
your belief
Awesome,
is if
Lindsay.
you take the time to practice all the time, that there is a point that it just comes natural and the pain kind of just goes away at some point. Like, do you feel like there's like this day where people are like, I don't feel it anymore. I'm not even noticing.
Even better than yes. Well, that's the thing. It's a weird phrase, but I say I succeed in the negative, which is all of a sudden, 6 months later, you go, oh my God, I am not feeling that hip pain that I felt for years. You never have this moment where you go, oh my God, it's gone. I'm fixed. Right. But what you realize is that a week or a month has gone by where you don't feel this thing that you thought was never going to go away, that you thought this pain was going to be with you for life. And all of a sudden, it's no longer there. So you actually realize it a little down the road. But I love that moment, right? Where you go, oh,
Oh my
wow,
goodness. Yeah.
this simple little nothing changed everything. And you can see, like, it's not a lot, right? Standing differently, walking differently. It's just not in our brain to think about changing those things until someone comes along and says, it's not that hard. If you're willing to commit, if you're willing to stick with it a while, it'll happen.
Yeah, it's so awesome. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
the demonstrations today and
my
walking this hour
pleasure.
of your time. Thank you.
My pleasure, Lindsay. Have a great day. Take care.
Great. You too.